Charlie Mackay was wiping down the counter at the Daily Grind when the bell above the door jingled, signaling the start of another morning rush in Greenwich Village. He loved these early shifts, the hum of the espresso machine, the chatter of regulars, the way the city seemed to wake up with every pour of coffee. Owning his own cafe was still a distant dream, but here, he felt alive, part of the neighborhood's pulse. Most customers were friendly, their orders as familiar as their faces. But something about this morning felt different, like a storm was brewing behind the polished glass door. A man in a crisp suit strode in, his shoes clicking sharply on the hardwood floor. He didn't glance at the chalkboard menu or the cozy mismatched chairs. He sat at a table by the window, eyes scanning the room like he was sizing it up. Charlie approached with his usual smile, pen poised over his notepad. "Morning. What can I get started for you?" "Scrambled eggs with bacon," the man said, barely looking up from his phone. His voice was clipped, impatient. Charlie nodded and relayed the order to Manuel, the chef, who was already flipping pancakes in the back. The kitchen was small but efficient, and Manuel's cooking was a point of pride for the Daily Grind. Charlie had no doubt the plate would be perfect. When the food arrived, steaming and golden, the man barely touched it. He poked at the eggs with his fork, took a single bite of bacon, and then leaned back, crossing his arms. "This is unacceptable," he said, loud enough for heads to turn. "The eggs are rubbery. The bacon's overcooked. I can't eat this." Charlie's smile faltered, but he kept his tone steady. "I'm sorry to hear that, sir. I can have the kitchen remake it, or get you something else on the house." Inside, he felt a prickle of unease. Complaints weren't uncommon, but this felt staged. The man's eyes gleamed with something sharp, like he was testing the waters. "No, I don't want another plate of garbage," the man snapped, pushing the dish away. "This is supposed to be a decent place, right? Do better." His voice carried, drawing curious glances from other customers. Charlie's jaw tightened, but he nodded, apologizing again. He cleared the plate and comped the meal, hoping that would be the end of it. The man left without another word, but Charlie couldn't shake the feeling that he'd be back, and not for the coffee. As the morning rush continued, Charlie moved through his tasks on autopilot, pouring lattes and joking with regulars. But his mind kept circling back to the man in the suit. There was something calculated about his outburst, like he'd rehearsed it. Charlie had seen his share of difficult customers, but this one felt different. It wasn't just a bad day or a picky palate. It was like the guy was playing a game, and Charlie was an unwilling pawn. By the time his shift ended, Charlie was still turning it over. He leaned against the counter, watching the last customers linger over their mugs. The Daily Grind was his sanctuary, a place where he could connect with people, make their mornings a little brighter. But now, a shadow had crept in. He didn't know the man's name or his motives, but he had a sinking feeling this wasn't the last he'd see of him. And if he was right, Charlie would need to be ready, for what, he wasn't sure. But he'd worked too hard, poured too much of himself into this place, to let someone tear it down without a fight. The village kept buzzing outside, oblivious to the quiet battle lines being drawn inside the Daily Grind. Charlie untied his apron, his dream of owning a cafe feeling just a little heavier. Whatever was coming, he'd face it head-on. He always did. Charlie was steaming milk for a cappuccino when the bell jingled, and his stomach tightened. It was him, the man in the suit, back at the Daily Grind just 3 days after his scene over the eggs and bacon. This time, he wasn't alone. A woman in a sleek blazer sat across from him, her smile polite but strained as they settled at a table near the counter. Charlie caught her eye and nodded, but his focus was on the man, who was already scanning the menu with that same sharp, calculating look. "Welcome back," Charlie said, approaching their table, his voice calm but guarded. "What can I get started for you today?" The man didn't look up. "Steak and fries. Medium rare. And make it quick." The woman ordered a salad, her tone softer, almost apologetic. Charlie scribbled the orders and headed to the kitchen, where Manuel raised an eyebrow. "Same guy?" Manuel asked, already prepping the grill. "Yup," Charlie muttered. "Feels like he's up to something." He didn't have proof, but his gut told him this wasn't about the food. The man's last visit had left a sour taste, and Charlie wasn't about to let him disrupt the cafe's vibe again. The kitchen hummed as Manuel seared the steak, checking it with a practiced eye. Charlie delivered the plates himself, setting the sizzling steak in front of the man and the salad before the woman. "Enjoy," he said, stepping back but keeping them in his peripheral vision. It didn't take long. The man sliced into the steak, took one bite, and shoved the plate forward. "This is cold," he said, his voice cutting through the cafe's low buzz. "And the fries are soggy. What kind of place is this?" Heads turned again, and the woman's cheeks flushed. She poked at her salad, avoiding eye contact. Charlie's patience thinned, but he kept his cool. "I'm sorry you're not satisfied, sir. I can have the kitchen remake it, or we can get you something else." He glanced at the woman, who looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. "Remake it?" the man scoffed. "I shouldn't have to eat subpar food in the first place." His tone was louder now, drawing more stares. The woman murmured something to him, but he waved her off. "No, they need to hear this. This place is a joke." Charlie's hands clenched behind his back. He'd dealt with complainers before, but this guy was different. His words felt like a performance, each one aimed at getting something for free. The woman's embarrassment only confirmed it, she wasn't in on whatever game he was playing. "I'll take care of it," Charlie said, grabbing the plate. He comped the meal again, against his better judgment, and the man left with a smirk, the woman trailing behind him. As the door swung shut, Charlie leaned against the counter, replaying the scene. 2 visits, 2 complaints, 2 free meals. This wasn't a coincidence. The guy was fishing, banking on the daily grind's goodwill to scam his way through the menu. Charlie thought of the cafe's regulars, the staff who worked hard every day, and Mr. Fitzgerald, the owner, who trusted him to keep things running smoothly. Letting this guy walk all over them wasn't an option. He turned to Manuel, who was scrubbing the grill. "Next time he shows up, we're ready for him," Charlie said, his voice low. Manuel grinned, catching his drift. The daily grind wasn't just a job for Charlie, it was a piece of his dream, a place he'd fight to protect. If this guy thought he could keep pulling the same stunt, he was about to learn Charlie wasn't as easy to play as he thought. The cafe settled back into its rhythm, but Charlie's mind was racing. He didn't know when the man would return, but he'd be watching. The village outside kept moving, unaware of the small war brewing behind the counter. For Charlie, it was personal now. Charlie was restocking coffee beans when the bell above the daily grind's door chimed, and there he was again, the man in the suit, striding in like he owned the place. It had been a week since his last stunt, and Charlie's instincts kicked into high gear. This time, the man was alone, no date to impress or embarrass. He slid into a booth, his eyes darting around the cafe before landing on the menu. Charlie exchanged a quick glance with Manuel through the kitchen pass-through. They'd been waiting for this. "Morning," Charlie said, approaching with a notepad, his tone neutral but his senses sharp. "What'll it be today?" "Lobster," the man said, leaning back with a smug grin. "And it better be fresh. I know my seafood." His voice had that same edge, like he was already rehearsing his complaint. Charlie nodded, jotting it down, but inside, a plan was forming. This wasn't just another order, it was a chance to turn the tables. In the kitchen, Charlie pulled Manuel aside. "He's going for the lobster," he said, keeping his voice low. "Says it better be fresh. I'm betting he'll find something to gripe about, no matter what." Manuel smirked, cracking his knuckles. "Then let's make it perfect. He wants fresh. He'll get the best lobster we've got." They got to work, selecting a prime lobster from the tank, steaming it to exact specifications. Manuel checked the color, the texture, every detail. The plate was a work of art, claws vibrant, meat tender, paired with a drizzle of herb butter. Charlie delivered it himself, watching the man's face for any hint of his next move. The man poked at the lobster, breaking off a piece of claw. He chewed slowly, then set his fork down with a dramatic sigh. "This isn't right," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to glance over. "The claw's not pink enough. It's undercooked. I can't eat this." Charlie's pulse quickened, but he kept his expression calm. He'd called it. The complaint was as predictable as the morning rush. But this time, he was ready. "I'm sorry you feel that way, sir," he said, leaning in slightly. "Why don't you come back to the kitchen? We can show you just how fresh this lobster is." The man blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "Come see for yourself," Charlie said, gesturing toward the kitchen. "We've got nothing to hide." His voice was steady, but there was a challenge in it, just enough to make the man squirm. The other customers were watching now, their curiosity piqued. The man hesitated, his confidence flickering, but he couldn't back down without looking foolish. He stood, brushing off his suit, and followed Charlie. In the kitchen, Manuel was waiting, a live lobster in hand from the tank. "This is what we work with," Manuel said, holding it up. "Caught yesterday, straight from the supplier. That claw you're complaining about? Steamed to perfection. Want to check the rest of the batch?" His tone was polite, but his eyes were locked on the man, daring him to push further. The man's face tightened. He glanced at the lobster, then at Charlie, who stood with his arms crossed, waiting. The kitchen was quiet except for the faint sizzle of the grill. The man opened his mouth, then closed it. "Fine," he muttered. "Maybe I was mistaken." He turned to leave, but Charlie wasn't done. "Sir," Charlie said, stepping forward. "We take pride in our food here. If you're not happy, we'll always try to make it right. But we both know that lobster was perfect." He didn't raise his voice, but the words landed like a punch. The man froze, then walked out without another word, the bell jangling behind him. Back at the counter, Charlie felt a rush of adrenaline. He'd taken a risk, calling the man's bluff in front of everyone, but it had paid off. The regulars at the counter were grinning, one even giving him a thumbs up. Manuel clapped him on the shoulder. "Nice one, McKay. Think he'll be back?" "Not if he's smart," Charlie said, but he wasn't so sure. Guys like that didn't give up easily. Still, he'd shown the man that the daily grind wasn't an easy mark. The cafe felt a little more like his own now, a place worth defending. As the lunch crowd trickled in, Charlie went back to work, but his mind was already on the next move. This wasn't over, not yet. The buzz in the daily grind felt different the next morning, like the air itself was charged with Charlie's victory. Regulars whispered about the showdown in the kitchen, their nods and smiles boosting his confidence as he poured coffee and cleared tables. The man in the suit hadn't shown his face since Charlie called his bluff, but the moment still replayed in his mind. He'd stood up for the cafe, and it felt good, damn good. Still, he kept an eye on the door, half expecting the guy to slink back with a new angle. Charlie was wiping down the espresso machine when Mr. Fitzgerald, the owner, called him to the back office. Fitz was a gruff but fair man, always in a flannel shirt, with a knack for knowing when the cafe needed him. "Heard about your stunt yesterday," Fitz said, leaning back in his chair. "Inviting that guy to the kitchen? Bold move, McKay." Charlie shifted, unsure if this was praise or a warning. "I didn't mean to cause a scene. Just got tired of him scamming us." Fitz chuckled, a rare sound. "You did right. Guy's been pulling that crap at other spots in the village. I checked with a buddy who runs a diner on Bleecker. Same playbook, complain, get a free meal, repeat." He leaned forward, eyes steady. "I'm banning him. He's done here. You okay with that?" "More than okay," Charlie said, a grin breaking through. thanks for having my back. You earned it, Fitz said, waving him off. Now get back out there. We've got customers. Charlie returned to the counter, his step lighter. The ban was a win, not just for him but for the whole crew. Manuel gave him a fist bump as he passed the kitchen, and even Sarah, the part-time barista, flashed a thumbs up. The regulars, too, seemed to sense the shift. One, a retired teacher named Helen, leaned over her latte and said, "You showed that guy, Charlie. This place is lucky to have you." The words hit deeper than he expected. The daily grind wasn't just a job, it was his proving ground, a place where he could show what he was made of. He'd always dreamed of owning a cafe, but moments like this made him feel like he was already building something real. Still, he couldn't shake the thought that the man might not be done. Scammers didn't always slink away quietly, and Charlie's gut told him to stay sharp. By lunch, the cafe was packed, the clatter of plates and hum of conversation filling the space. Charlie moved through the crowd, refilling mugs and cracking jokes, but his mind kept drifting to the bigger picture. He'd handled one problem, but running a place like this meant facing 100 more. If he wanted his own shop someday, he'd need to be ready for anything, crooks, critics, or just the grind of keeping the doors open. The thought was daunting, but it also lit a fire in him. As the day wound down, Charlie caught Manuel's eye. "Think we're in the clear?" he asked, half joking. Manuel shrugged, tossing a dish towel over his shoulder. "Maybe. But if he shows up again, we'll just serve him another perfect lobster." They both laughed, but Charlie knew it wasn't just about the food. It was about standing his ground, protecting what mattered. The daily grind was his home turf, and he'd fight for it, no matter who walked through that door. The village outside pulsed with its usual energy, but inside the cafe, Charlie felt a new kind of strength. He'd faced a small battle and won, and the taste of it made him hungry for more. Whatever came next, he'd be ready, not just as a waiter, but as someone who could hold his own. The daily grind hummed with its usual morning rhythm, but Charlie moved through it with a new kind of ease. The showdown with the scammer had spread like wildfire among the regulars, turning him into a quiet hero of the cafe. Customers lingered longer at the counter, swapping stories with him, their smiles carrying a hint of pride. Even the staff treated him differently. Manuel's jokes had an extra warmth, and Sarah slipped him a free muffin with a wink. Charlie felt it all, the weight of their trust, and it pushed him to stand a little taller. One regular, Chloe Bennett, a writer who always claimed the corner table with her laptop, caught his eye as she scribbled furiously. "You're famous now, you know," she said, glancing up with a grin. "That kitchen move. Pure genius. I'm stealing it for a story." Charlie laughed, wiping down the counter. "Just doing my job." "What's the story about?" "A small-town guy running a cafe, outsmarting crooks with charm and guts," she said, her eyes sparkling. "Sound familiar?" She tapped her notebook. "You're the inspiration, Charlie. Don't let it go to your head." He shook his head, flattered but embarrassed. The idea of being in a story was surreal, but it stirred something in him. The daily grind wasn't just a pit stop anymore, it was proof he could handle whatever came his way. His dream of owning a cafe felt closer, not just a far-off hope but something he could almost touch. Every shift, every solved problem, was a step toward it. The cafe stayed busy, but Charlie's calm professionalism shone through. When a new customer complained about a latte being too cold, he handled it with a quick apology and a fresh drink, no drama. The regulars noticed, whispering about how he'd grown into the place. Even Mr. Fitzgerald, usually too busy with paperwork to chat, started lingering out front, watching Charlie work with a thoughtful look. One afternoon, Chloe slid a few typed pages across the counter. "First draft," she said. "Your character's name is Sam, but it's you. Read it when you get a chance." Charlie tucked the pages into his apron, promising he would. That night, alone in his apartment, he read her story. It was rough but gripping, with a version of him that felt both familiar and larger than life. He saw himself through her eyes, steady, clever, loyal to the cafe and its people. It made him realize how much he'd changed. The scammer never came back, and the ban held firm. But the lesson stuck with Charlie. He'd learned to spot trouble, to trust his instincts, and to act when it mattered. Those skills weren't just for chasing off con artists, they were the kind he'd need to run his own place someday. He started paying closer attention to the business side of the daily grind, noting how Fitz managed inventory or handled vendors. It was like a masterclass, and Charlie was soaking it up. As winter crept into the village, the daily grind became a haven for locals escaping the chill. Charlie worked the morning shifts with a quiet confidence, his bond with the cafe deeper than ever. He didn't know what was next, but he felt ready for it. The scammer had been a test, and he'd passed. Now, every pour of coffee, every smile from a regular, felt like a small victory, building towards something bigger. His dream was still out there, and he was closing the gap, one shift at a time. A year had passed since the scammer's banishment, and the daily grind was thriving. Charlie still worked the morning shifts, but now he carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who knew the place inside out. The cafe was more than a job, it was his training ground, where every spilled coffee and rushed order had sharpened his instincts. The regulars sensed it, their banter with him laced with respect. Even Chloe's story, now a short piece published in a local magazine, had cemented his status as the heart of the place. Charlie read it again sometimes, marveling at how far he'd come. One chilly April morning, Mr. Fitzgerald called Charlie to the back office. Fitz was sorting invoices, his flannel shirt rolled up at the sleeves. "Sit down, McKay," he said, his tone serious but warm. Charlie sat, a flicker of nerves in his chest. Fitz wasn't one for casual chats. "I've been watching you," Fitz started, leaning back. "Not just the scammer thing, though that was damn impressive. You get this place. The customers, the staff, the grind of it. You're not just working here, you're building something." He paused, studying Charlie. "I'm getting older. Can't run this place forever. Ever thought about owning a piece of it?" Charlie's breath caught. "You mean, like a partner?" "Co-owner," Fitz corrected, a rare smile breaking through. "Split the profits, the headaches, the whole deal. You've earned it. What do you say?" Charlie's mind raced. His dream of owning a cafe had always felt years away, blocked by loans and risks he couldn't yet take. But this? This was real, a chance to claim a stake in the place he'd poured his heart into. "I'm in," he said, his voice steady despite the thrill in his chest. "Thank you, Fitz. I won't let you down." They shook hands, and Fitz clapped him on the shoulder. "Good. We'll sort the paperwork. Now get back out there, those tables won't bust themselves." Charlie grinned, the weight of the moment sinking in as he returned to the counter. The daily grind was his now, not just a stepping stone but a foundation. The news spread fast. Manuel hooped when Charlie told him, and Sarah insisted on baking a celebratory batch of scones. The regulars toasted him with their coffee mugs, Helen calling him the boss with a wink. Chloe, scribbling at her usual table, promised a sequel to her story. "Sam's going big," she teased. Charlie laughed, but inside, he felt a quiet pride. He'd fought for this place, outsmarted a crook, and earned his spot. It wasn't just a win, it was a beginning. That night, as he locked up the cafe, Charlie paused outside, the neon sign casting a warm glow on the sidewalk. The village hummed around him, alive with possibility. He thought back to the scammer, the way that small battle had forced him to step up. It had taught him more than he'd expected, not just how to spot a con, but how to trust himself, how to lead. Running a cafe would bring new challenges, but he was ready. He'd learned to be part waiter, part detective, and now, part owner. Charlie pocketed the keys and walked home, his steps light. The daily grind was his venture now, a piece of his dream made real. Whatever came next, bigger crowds, tougher problems, or even new scams, he'd face it with the same grit that had carried him this far. The cafe's rhythm was his own, and he was just getting started.